Number 4. So self-abandonment. How do you love yourself? How do you break the habit of self-abandonment? And boundaries when you've had early childhood trauma. Mine was sexual trauma, so I had physical boundaries, emotional, psychic boundaries that had been violated. And I could understand the concept of boundaries, but to establish them from the inside out, not from the outside, not an armored response to a situation, not a reactive volcanic eruption response. Like, have you ever been in that situation where something little happens, but you have this overreaction to the moment, and you can't justify, which is another part of the self-abandonment piece. You can't rationalize why you feel the way you feel, like you have to somehow make it make sense to somebody else. And so the self-abandonment piece, that was big work, right? Like, I got to grace and peace. That was the 90%, but this last 10% to get home to myself, I had to really fall in love with who I was, just as I was, make peace with everything that had ever happened in my life. And I started doing timeline work with myself and people that I would sit with, and every single person who I did timeline work with, we could begin to see this pattern of self-abandonment. So I knew I was not alone in this quest. So I began mapping my own process and mapping it out loud through different teachings and sharings with different people, and even still there was this gap between asking the question, do I love myself enough to heal? If not, why not? And getting to the bottom of the why not. And I realized that I couldn't think my way out of this. And I had spent so much of my life processing consciousness from the neck up, and sort of hoping my body would come along with me. I had a beautiful spiritual mentor watch me walk across the room. She goes, "Oh my goodness, Edie, you are so conscious from the neck up." But your body doesn't have any consciousness. It hasn't been met in full consciousness yet. And so she says, it's like your spirit is dragging this human form along with you. And I, the self-abandonment for the body that had medical trauma, that had sexual trauma, it was really big work. And so this is the shameless healing part of this process, that every single one of us has to do this work. Why do we have to do it in psychiatrists' offices and in therapists' offices? And we don't want anybody to know, one, that we're doing the work or the work that we're doing, and to deal with the shame, the individual shame that we carry. Ultimately, we have to understand that shame is collective shame, right? That's been projected onto us. So I'm all about creating this shameless healing bridge and mapping this path out of self-abandonment, this path of full consent to want to be here, not abandoning myself anymore. And there was this edge that kept coming up in me. And again, that quote, "Are you willing to disappoint another rather than betray yourself?" And my friend who read that poem to me, it triggered something. So this is August of 18. And his mom's been gone 4 years now, and I've had hundreds and hundreds of downloads and all of this beautiful neck up consciousness, but I had never really considered the wild and crazy ideas that would seem too fanciful, too self-indulgent, too like, you can't do that. That goes against the rules. You can't just have an experience that, might upset somebody else. It's one thing to think differently. It's another to go do something, like to bring your body along with you. And so I realized that the codependencies that were left in my life, where I was still abandoning myself, were in my primary relationship with my partner, Stephen. And, not his fault. I can't blame him. I'm the author of my own misery, right? And so I came home from that conversation with my friend about, are you willing to disappoint another? And to me, it came down to, am I willing to risk everything in my relationship with my beloved rather than betray myself? And so I had to trust that he and I could navigate this place together. And I said, look, I don't want a divorce, but I've never lived alone. I lived with my parents until I got married. I had 4 kids. And I left my ex-husband. I still had 4 kids and a mother and father in my life. And so I have never really figured out where my edges are. Where do I begin? And what is mine and what's not mine? And he well aware of some projections on my part. I had been through an Artist Way class a couple of years before that, where the first chapter of the book is make a list of all the things that you that get in the way of you doing your art. I'm an artist, and I'll just show you. That's one of my quilts. And if I'm not creating, I'm not living. I'm a creator. It's what I am. It's what I do. And so I come home and I say, here's the deal. I don't want a divorce, but I do need to live by myself for a little while. I need to know what time I like to get up in the morning, what time I like to go to sleep, what I want to eat, what do I want to do with this body? I want to move it more, but I have this inhibition about using my body in front of anybody. And still a tender bit there. My body had not been my own in the early years. And so it was hard to figure out, who am I without armor? What do armor? I could survive with armor, but there was no ease of beingness because I had to hold it all the time. That's the work, right? And so I said, I think I'll buy a motorhome and I'll go on a walkabout. And he was like, remember that part where you said you don't want to make any more money and we don't have anything coming in? And I was okay with that because we maintain, but now you want to go spend? And I was like, yeah, I know this doesn't make any sense. And that's the point. Sometimes you have to make an audacious statement to your inner child. And that's who was like, this abandonment piece. I'm still in here. This 3-year-old that is, has been holding space, waiting for the adult Edie to show up. And there's an 8-year-old in there who really wants a say in what happens next. And a 12-year-old part of myself, all the fragments of me that splintered off as a strategy of survival, and all the coping mechanisms, the hyper independence, the hyper vigilance, the hyper competency, like beyond reproach. Like I needed to just fall apart for a while, and I needed to do it by myself. And I said, I think a motorhome is cheaper than a divorce. And in that moment, there was a little bit of agreement and concern that I was, this seemed like a risky behavior. And I'd always been hyper competent, hyper super mom, the Mormon thing level. I mean, that I met my coping mechanisms perfectly in my Mormon persona. I no longer had the Mormon persona. I blew that when I laid out my temple name. I was going to hell, so what the hell, right? And so he says, well, whatever you do, I don't want anything to do with this. And I was like, okay, whatever. I'll figure out how to finance it. I'll do this. And I found a little motorhome at 22 feet. I can park her anywhere. And I'd never done anything like this before, but I remembered being about 12 years old, and my girlfriend invited me to come with their family camping for the summer up in Markleyville. Something about that summer changed my life. It was the first time I'd been away from my family for any length of time, and I had a new lens of perception to be in a family situation where I felt safe. And my friend's father was a healed, masculine, safe person. My friend's mother adored me. She was an Avon lady, and so she gave me nurturing and sweetness. I felt very gumpy and stumpy and heavy. I was already putting on the weight at that point. It was a mechanism to keep my father at bay. And I felt met and loved. And we spent the summer in a camper. And I realized, oh, the 12-year-old really wants this. And the 3-year-old's going, yeah. And the 8-year-old's going, please do this. And so I found this motorhome and I bought it and I brought it home. And I didn't know where I was going to go. But my first part of the adventure, I was beginning to just dream into it a little bit. And a friend posted that they had an extra Burning Man ticket. Now, I've never been to Burning Man. I didn't know what I was signing up for. I kind of did. I knew it would be hot, and I don't like heat. I knew it would be dusty, and I don't like dust, but I would have a cocoon, a chrysalis to hang out in. It would get me out the door. It would be a pattern interrupt for my whole previous life experience. It would depend on my body in ways that I hadn't given my body any credit for a long time. And so I said, yes, I'll do Burning Man. And then it turned out that we would meet in Reno, and I would go in with this group of beautiful, rich, sweet, and I don't mean rich in wealth, I mean rich in whole heart and soul humans. And so I knew that come on, Mom, we'll take care of you. All young people, come on, Mom. And so I said yes. And 2 nights before I'm ready to leave, I'm packing up, and I got the list. Everybody sends you what you must have at Burning Man, and I was down to the flashlights and the headlamps and the masks and the covers for your rig, and I mean I spent a fortune. And the consumption associated with Burning Man didn't weigh well on me, but nonetheless, I bought the ticket. I was going to go. And so now I'm packing. And I'm packing things for Tutu Tuesday. Now, I don't do costume. Like, this body has never been my friend. It's not sexy. It's not pretty. And dressing it up sexy and pretty is, but I'm like, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna say yes to things I've never said yes before. And so I'm packing, and Steven's just sitting there watching me and having his own story about all this. And he says, I get it. You've never lived by yourself. You need some space. I love you. I'm all in on us. And so we'd come to this place of sweet, conscious intimacy with each other, that we're as interested in each other's growth as we are getting our own needs met. Like it's a masterclass stuff in couples. And by this time we've been together for 23 years. And in fact, our 20th wedding anniversary was about 5 days after I got back from Burning Man. So just put a pin in that. So I'm listening to him. You could park it at the bottom of our property. You could go to a campground. There's, the walkabout made sense until you threw Burning Man into the mix. And I was listening, and the 12-year-old, she got really loud. And she said, I don't know how to explain this to you, nor should I have to. I just have to do this. And you can either be okay with this or not. That does not change the trajectory of this choice. I have to do this. And so, a day and a half later, I've loaded the rig and I'm set to go to Reno to meet up with my friends, to go to Burning Man, to begin a walkabout, to reclaim some parts of me that I had left behind a long time prior to that. And we say our goodbyes, and the tears for both of us. But so sometimes you've got to be willing to risk it all. And so I get in the rig, and in the 2 weeks since I'd purchased the rig, where I lived is a very hot, dusty, sandy kind of soil. And as I'm driving down the steep part of our dirt road to get to the turn that takes me onto the more paved part of our road, I'm in the rig, and I've got this, and music's on, and I've got this, and I start to drive down the property, and the rig starts to slide on this sandy, sloughy soil. And I put the brake on, and it goes into the ditch on the side of our road. And I'm like, no, this can't be happening. This can't, don't tell me I've come this far in trusting my inner child, and I can't even get off my own property. And I'm having an existential crisis in that moment. And I put it in reverse, and I back it up. Thankfully, it goes really well backwards up the hill. And I take that breath, that nervous system resetting breath, and I go, got this, we can do this. And I start to head down, and now it's sliding even more because it wants to follow the previous curve, and it's just right into the ditch even more. And now I'm screaming. I'm screaming, and I know he can hear me. He's 150 feet away on the deck watching me go through this interminable, is that the right word? Like it felt like time had stood still. There was only that moment in my life. And I back it up again, and I'm like, what the, pardon my French, fuck is happening? What am I supposed to do? And I get this clear audio in my ear. And it's really simple. Take your foot off the brake and go all in on you. And I'm like, what? Take your foot off the brake and go all in on you. But I'm going to crash. I'm going to... Take your foot off the brake. And so I take a deep breath, and I put it in drive, and I do not put my foot on the brake, and it just goes, and it goes around the turn, and I'm about 300 yards now from earshot, and I'm at the part of our road where it's paved now, and I've got this, and I put it in park, and I scream and laugh and cry, and there's this nervous system release of 60 years of holding back. That part of myself that wants to be expressed. No more self-abandonment here. Ooh. I tell a lot of my humans that come sit with me for healing conversations, I want you to do something that makes no sense to anybody else, something audacious, something that has an invitation associated with it. There's a part of your inner child that is so willing to play with you at this level. And so I drive to Reno and I don't even blink, and I'm there in 4 hours, and I pull into the Walmart parking lot, which turns out is the staging area for Burning Man, and I laid down and I slept like a toddler. You know how they run, and then they crash? I slept like a toddler. The hypervigilance that has kept me awake most nights of my life, because my father would come to me in my sleep. I slept. The 3-year-old felt safe because grown-up Edie met her. And so our friends arrived, and we met up and got into Burning Man, and 12 hours on the playa with a dust storm, and there are 20 cars in the parking lot queue moving forward inches at a time, and everything I hate about life: heat, dust, noisy humans, and my own self-consciousness of my body. Everybody's out there in bathing suits and next to nothings, and dancing on the tops and the roofs, and I'm like, what have I still have some Mormon in me. This is all so much. I got invited to the Orgy Dome almost immediately, which was Stephen's greatest fear, that I was leaving him instead of finding me. And I knew immediately that I was not up for any sexual trauma work while I was on the playa. And so that wasn't even in my awareness. And I made it through 6 days of Burning Man. And it was the best and the worst of times. But it was a start. It was a pattern interrupt. It was a moment where I proved to myself I could actually do something without help. Without anybody's support around me, I could do this. Only as it turned out, I did need support. I had an awning on the side of my rig that I had opened up to kind of cut some of the heat. And the wind came up and began to warp and twist the awning. And nobody was around to help me on day 6. And I thought, I'm going to lose this. I'm going to destroy this brand new rig, used. Only had 30,000 miles on it when I bought it. 2002 rig. Some point I'll introduce you to Sally. You'll get to see her, and I'll take you inside because I did a lot of big work in Sally. And I decided to go someplace else. I was done with Burning Man. I got my full ride's worth, and I was riding off the playa, and dust storm, and this guy comes running up and knocks on my window. He goes, "Hey lady, you know your awning's still out there?" I said, "I know, it's warped, it's twisted. I can't get it down by myself. I'm just gonna leave and see if I can get help in town at a gas station." And he goes, "You see that big semi truck over there, the one with all the craftsman tools right there? Magic, so magic." My brother Louis was just such an incredible MacGyver. He could fix anything, any problem you had. Louis was your guy, and he had a garage full of craftsman tool. So all of a sudden I felt my brother just right there with me, like, "Don't give up, sis." And this guy goes, "Pull up right there. I'll help you fix it." And I get out, and I'm covered in dust, and I'm streaming with tears. And he goes and gets 3 more guys, and within 15 minutes, they are up on ladders, and they're fixing, and I'm set to roll off the playa in one piece. And so I left Burning Man whole, and I pulled back into the Walmart parking lot and just took a big deep breath, like I'd been through some big birthing experience, and this was the postpartum moment of just sort of, who am I? I need a shower. I stink. I need food, and I called my daughter and I said, "Can I come sit with you for a day before I go home? I'm not quite ready to go meet Stephen just yet." And so I rolled on into Livermore and spent the night with her and had a shower and kind of cried. Oh my God, I cried. But it was tears of accomplishment. I trusted myself. And little by little, that moment of trust, I began to fall in love with trusting myself, because each time I did, it opened up more and more and more access to all the parts of me that had been tucked away safely, waiting for me to do what I'm calling now my roundup of all of my personal elements that had to step away for a while to keep me safe. So let me just stop the story here and ask you to think about, what audacious invitation have you been turning down your whole life? You know, like we call it a midlife crisis, but it's really a midlife revival. And I invite you to step into the revival wholeheartedly. Give yourself some room, and hopefully your partner can ride this out with you. When I got home, I found out what kind of partner I really have. So stay tuned. I'll share that next time.